But starting with my police experience, I never actually wanted to be a police officer. I wanted to go to medical school. I wanted to be a doctor. But I was standing on the corner one night, and I saw this young kid who I'd seen quite a bit. I don't know how old he was. He may have been 10, 11. Needless to say, he should not have been out on the street at the time of night I was out on the street. It was probably midnight or 1 a.m. And for some reason, I struck him. I struck a conversation up with him that night. And I remember saying to him, what do you want to do when you grow up? And he said to me, I want to be like AZ. AZ was one of these local drug dealer kids who was a real punk, but once in a while he'd put on a performance in the little like atrium, like open area in the middle of the housing projects. And it occurred to me, it was really almost a transformative moment, that his America was not ours. The idea of being a doctor, writing a book, an engineer had never even occurred to him. And I thought that there's something going on here that I have to have some role in changing. And it really sparked an interest, not particularly in politics, as we would think, at political races and candidates, but it sparked an interest in me in ideology, liberal versus conservative, libertarian versus green, economic ideology, Austrian school versus Chicago school, that there's got to be an answer here. And whatever answer there is clearly wasn't implemented here. But I found the Secret Service, and I loved the job. I say to people all the time, it's the closest thing to being famous without anybody knowing who you are. There's none of the downsides. But you get to live this life and be part of government at the absolute highest levels. But I found it incredible in the Secret Service because, again, I kept thinking, what is wrong here? What happened in that 7-5 precinct? And I kept thinking, is it government? Is it government? Is it government? And I was always fascinated in the Secret Service, having worked with people from literally the White House on down to an administrative assistant in HHS somewhere, because the Secret Service is an interesting job. You're always traveling around to different agencies, visiting people. They bring in temporary staffers, that everybody was so terrific to work with. So I thought it can't be a matter of personal incompetence. I mean, the men and women of the service, the staff I worked with, they would work 8 in the morning to midnight every night on a foreign advance for no overtime at all, and no one ever complained about it. It just was the job. The mission was clear. So time went on, and I just got more and more disconnected from what I felt, in my case, was a parasitic lifestyle. And I don't mean that in any qualitative way as a reflection on government work. It's strictly personal. I looked around at my neighbors. We were I believe we still are, but we were in a really bad recession at the time. And I was suffering no ill consequences at all, not a bit. Gas prices went up. I had a government gas card. I had a government car. My salary went up every year. There were no inflation adjustments unless they went up. And I felt like I had no skin in the game. We've almost fallen into a middle-class apathy, and we've let the country just kind of slowly dissipate around us. People ask me all the time in politics, what can we do? And I say, you're asking the wrong questions. I say, the right question is not can we do? The question is, what are you doing now? There are people who ask me that question who I say, who's your congressman? They have no idea. Think about the apathy that's bred in the country. I mean, in a midterm election, it's not uncommon for up to 50% of the people not to even vote. And I thought, I can't. I can't do that. I'm sorry. I'd rather die poor. And my wife and I had a long, prolonged conversation because I had one daughter at the time. I have 2 now. But there were very real consequences to me leaving. So I walked upstairs, told the boss my wife was pregnant, I was resigning. He was a good guy, Tim. He thought I was nuts, was ready to call the Secret Service psychologist. And I walked out, and they have a blast door in the Secret Service to take ballistic rounds, a really heavy steel door. And when it slammed, it would really rock the whole building. It was amazing. And when I walked out and that door slammed, I tell you, not to be melodramatic, but it was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. It still kind of echoes because I knew that was the last time that door would ever shut. And I walked away and jumped in the longest of long shot United States Senate races potentially in American history. Did it starting with 2 donors, me and my dad. It worked out kind of well, and I don't want to get into all the politics of the race. We eventually lost, but it was an incredible experience. It built a lot of character in me, and it taught me a lot about the system that I thought I had already seen being a Secret Service agent, having been through 3 presidential elections. I thought this was all old hat, but I did learn a lot about the process. And folks, it's the process that's broken. Here's how the system works, and here's where the siren needs to be sounded, because as the bureaucracy grows, what happens is when everybody's responsible for something, the tragedy of the commons, nobody is. And that's how you get a situation like Benghazi, where they ultimately admit openly in the ARB, the Accountability Review Board, that, oh, we didn't know, it went through the bureaucracy, as if that's just some fugue state, it's not real people. The reason people in specific factions don't want to give up responsibility for whatever it may be, let's say it's bank fraud or credit card fraud, is because there's no power in yes in the government. There's only power in no. When I can sit there as a federal agent and I have jurisdiction over a crime you need investigated in the private sector, you need to come to me because I have monopoly power over that. There's no private police force. So it's in my best interest to maintain that relationship because you have the private money. And when I leave, believe me, I'm going to ask you for repayment. So if I give up whatever that may be, bank fraud, there's moneyed interest in everything, I now lose my angle when I retire. It's not during your time in the government where you make your money, it's when you leave. And it's this dreaded carousel that's causing the problem. Now, it's the very same problem when it comes to the lobby side. It's the moneyed interests that can buy off specific aspects of our government that have controlled everything, including policy. Very rarely does your representative actually represent you. The process is very simple. You get a PAC, the PAC donates to me, you get access, you get to make your case. If I don't think it's going to be catastrophic for me electorally and I can put up a smoke screen, I'm going to go out and I'm going to vote for that piece of legislation, assuming you continue to support me later on and fund my campaign. It's all about not only the preservation of my contacts in the private sector internally, but about maintaining access to that private sector later on when either I leave Congress or whatever it may be, and maintaining access to that money pool. Folks, it's an extremely pernicious problem because, again, as this bureaucracy grows, what you're seeing is a sandwiching of layers where upper management and political appointees love it because it allows them to absorb the blow of a bad decision by blaming it on a bureaucracy, and the American people have just come to accept it. Imagine if we did that in the private sector. But no one thinks anything of it because as the bureaucracy grows, again, the tragedy of the commons gets worse and worse and worse. And what's the byproduct? Lazy bureaucratic efforts to stop what they can't stop through common sense reforms. We can fix it though, folks, and I think it's going to take some good, passionate people going forward. And I think it's going to take more people to speak out. I think right now there's a crisis of internal leadership. I think people during a recession are afraid to leave, but I speak to people all the time on my cell phone, on the inside, who are just as frustrated as I am, whether from the military or anywhere else. And I think it's going to take just a tidal wave of people speaking out to really create some effective change.